Alrighty, welcome back from another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today we got another good show for you. Some news happened. The college football playoffs have been officially approved. The expansion format dates are set. We've got some thoughts. The overall takeaway is more football is good, and it's a good day. Never going to complain about more competitive football games. It's not like the Pro Bowl or the NBA All-Star game. We're actually going to get some really competitive games at the end of the year. And then we're going to talk a couple recruits after that, some updates on them and some things that are progressing with a couple of players. So, but before we do, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. All right. Well, as we hinted at, college football playoffs are set. 12-team playoffs starting this year. We don't have to, in a year or two. It's literally happening this year. The realignment. Oklahoma's in the SEC as far as from a football's perspective right now. 5 conference champions get the top 5 spots, and then the best 7 after that. Jose, what do you think? What are some of your takeaways on this?
So, what you said, to reiterate, more football is always good, and college football specifically, because we do get NFL throughout that time. So, we're just getting some additional college football, basically. The one thing that I will always, or I will never understand, is how backwards they are at figuring this stuff out. Like, why make it top 5 and not just top 4 that get auto bids, because there's only 4 top seeds. And now you only have 4 power conferences. Like, if this was a year ago when you still had the Pac-12, then 5 auto bids for the 5 conference champs, to me, makes more sense, because you're rewarding your power conference champions. Now it's basically a guarantee that a group of 5 conference champ gets in, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Well, the reason why that they're giving 5 buys is because if you have 4 in a 12-team format, you'll have one team that won't match up with anyone.
So they get 4 buys. I get that. But
Yeah.
the top 5 seeds get automatic bids.
Oh.
And those top 5 seeds are the top 5 conference champions, regardless of rank. So it could be, the top 4 are the, 1, 2, 3, 4, the conference champions of the Big 12, ACC, SEC, and Big 10. But who's that fifth power? Who's the 5th conference champion, right? It would have to be a group of 5, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair.
And then they would be, I mean, I don't, the one thing I guess will be interesting to see, and maybe you guys understood it better when you read about it, or someone that's watching the video understood it better when they read about it or listened to something about it. That 5th auto bid, will they automatically get the 5th seed, or will it just be slotted somewhere between 5 and 12? Because that would also be interesting if they automatically get number 5 because they're a conference champ, but they could be ranked 15th in the overall poll. Like, you're putting them in a, I guess you're putting them in a good position because they get to host a champion a playoff game, but they're probably going to get ran by whoever they play against if they're that low ranked, right? It's just interesting. It's a backwards train of thought. So giving 5 auto bids, you're basically saying, like, we have to gift this to a group of 5 team because they've been clamoring to be included in the playoffs. But in a 12 team, it doesn't make sense unless it is like a UCF from a few years ago, or Cincinnati when they were not in the Big 12, when they were undefeated, would have been top 12 in the country regardless of what conference they were in. Now it just seems like, here's your pity point, and you're just going to get ran to the playoffs when you host, if they do get number 5, or you get ran but you get to travel to a big stadium. So I guess we'll see how that works. Obviously, I like the 12-team format. I just don't understand the 5 and 7 mix rather than 4 and 8.
No, I was wondering the same thing, because is it going to be Tulane or something in that 5th spot regardless? Because it doesn't make sense. It would have made a lot more sense, like you said, a year ago or 2 years ago if the Pac-12 didn't die, but it's weird now.
Yeah, the only other thing I could think was Notre Dame. Like, it's basically an auto bid for Notre Dame to be in every year.
I believe, and correct me, someone watching this might be able to correct me, but I believe that it'll actually be the fifth seed doesn't go to the conference champion, of the
Okay.
group of five. So, like this year, the 12th seed would have been Liberty
Got it.
at 12.
And
I think
that would have
it's,
been their automatic bid because of the conference
yeah,
champion.
you get selected no matter what, but you don't get to go to the number 5 seed just because you're a fifth conference champion. So I
That
think
makes
it's
sense.
just because, like, looking at last year, for example, I mean, your top four or Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. Those are your um, four. But I mean, I guess you could argue that Michigan and Washington wouldn't be able to make the playoffs in the same year as conference champions. But it's, let's just say that they're in
Florida
different.
State had been that fifth seed this year if it existed.
Do what?
Florida State had been that fifth seed if it was.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they would have been the fifth seed. Um, so they would have been 5, and then they would have played Liberty. Oklahoma was at 12, but they would have played Liberty at 12. So Oklahoma
Because
would have been the last team or the first team left out in this scenario. And then, I mean, which isn't that bad. I mean, to me, if you're the 12th ranked team, I have a lot easier of a time just saying you should have just won more games. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. The difference between 5 and 11 or 12 and 11, excuse me. I mean, you can't really complain if you're in that realm. I mean, if you lose 2-3 times, you
Especially
kind of deserve to be left out.
last year we did it to ourselves. Like that team should have won 12-0. I think we all would agree there. Like we kind of played ourselves last year with that system. We would have no right to bitch. Two really bad.
I mean,
really not good teams.
I love this 12-team format. I just think the rules they put for themselves is for an NCAA or a college football landscape of a year ago or 2 years ago, not what's moving forward. Because, I was just thinking about it. Those schools that are that number 5 seed or the 5th auto bid, like, at some point they're going to start, complaining about how, well, we're the 5th conference champion. We should get to host a playoff game. That's a lot of money into their campus, into their surrounding community. Like, why wouldn't they want to host? Especially, like, if it was Florida State in this year's example. Like, you just took away a ton of money from that area.
They could host a playoff game.
Oh,
If
I agree.
I mean, if they, are ranked that high, I mean, if they're ranked 8 in the country, which I can't remember when Central Florida went on that ridiculous run when they beat, I think, what was it, Auburn in the Peach Bowl, I think it was, when they claimed the national championship. They were in the top 10, I believe.
I think they were.
So in that scenario, unless they were the 9 or 10 seed, 9 or 10 spot, they would have hosted. So
That's true.
I think it's fair and I think it's right to give one spot to a group of 5. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what makes sports so great. And that's why we love, March Madness, is you have these little schools that generally don't have any business of being, in the Final Four, like a Porter Moser with Loyola Chicago. They don't really belong there. But what happens if, a Liberty, now we watched them, what happened against Oregon, but what happens if a Central Florida, when they were still a group of 5, went in on the road and beat a Florida State? Could you imagine?
It'd be huge.
Oregon State team all those years ago, that was really, really, really good.
Yeah, well, and they beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl.
They were tough. They could have done it. They could have made some noise.
Yeah, I mean, they're
now outside of the playoff, though, we're all going to be shit.
Have they really been that good anyway?
I mean, I'm a fan of bowl season. I think it's fun, but no, there's not going to be really any marquee bowl games now. I mean, they're all going to be
in the playoffs.
Well, ever since it went to the 14 playoff format, bowl season has lost a little bit of its luster because, I mean, a lot of a lot of guys opt out and prepare for the league. So I mean, but in this scenario, you give more bowls or more playoff football in the month of December, that you get more quality football.
Yeah.
And
Well, and like you can, like, I think that you brought up a good point because like pre-playoff format, I don't think as many people would be complaining about going to the Alamo Bowl this year. The Alamo Bowl isn't like a shitty bowl. It's not one of the New Year's Six, but it's still a good bowl game with a lot of history behind it. Like Brandon and I have been reading a lot of books about like, we read a Bob Stoops one, a Mike Leach one. We're reading one about Stat Kelly. For those, I'm sure a lot of you that listen to this podcast or know who he is. He's a spotter for Toby Rowland. They all talk about bowl games pre-playoff and talk highly of them, regardless of them. But now we all complain about. Well, it's either New Year's Six playoff or they're shit. Like we don't care to be them. Just don't even invite us. We'd rather not go. Kind of scenario.
no, it's true. I mean, it's unfortunately just the reality. I mean, it's only going to get even worse because I mean, if you're not one of the 12 teams in, I mean, what are you doing? And
So I'm saying there's really no good bowl game now if you're not one of the 12 teams. Because yeah, like Jose mentioned, you know, there's still the New Year's Six currently, or the way it was with the 4 team, and if you're not a New Year's Six team, there's still bowls like the Alamo that are good. Now you're going to be playing in the Meineke Car Care Bowl if you're not a playoff team.
I mean,
I'm
you're
sure the
still
bowl
playing the
games are
Alamo
not
Bowl.
happy about this format. The bowl committees.
Oh, the bowl committees, yeah, they're definitely not, because they're not relevant at all anymore. Unless you're a fan of that team, you're not watching anymore.
And the problem is the home playoff games are not bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
But boy, wouldn't it be fun to host one of those when they go to Norman?
Oh yeah, I mean,
the electric.
That is something that I certainly obviously hope Oklahoma makes the playoffs this year. But just the thought of having a home college playoff game, I mean that first one, the first 3 this year are going to be electric.
Mm-hmm. And imagine, yeah,
these playoff games, and some schools are going to be pissed off about that. Because I mean, I for one will be pissed off about that if you're a road team. Because sometimes you get those calls you're at home and you're doing that shit in a playoff game. It's going to make some irate fan bases.
The tailgating at all the schools, the atmosphere. You're probably not playing anyone in your conference. Well, I guess never mind. It's mainly going to be Big Ten and SEC, so probably will be playing someone from your conference or the Big Ten. But still, pretty cool. You're going to probably host a school that rarely goes to your college town. So that'll be a good time.
Yeah, I mean, even if OU has to go on the road, could you imagine them going on the road to Penn State?
That'd be so fun.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I think, yeah.
I mean, or does, like Oklahoma host a rematch with LSU, after being in the Bayou 3 weeks ago, play LSU again. I mean, that's just one of the things that just depends on your schedule. I mean, you could be because you're all in the same conference. Most teams are in 2 conferences. You could be having rematches within a month of each other.
Guess we got to start racking up those airline points. There's a lot of traveling to do.
Yeah. So I like the format. I think it's more football. I'm glad they extended it into, for anyone that doesn't know, the 2024 playoff schedule. So the first round will be December 20th and 21st, which is a Friday, Saturday. And then December 31st, the traditional, one of the New Year's Six bowls. This year on December 31st, it is the Fiesta Bowl, excuse me. And I'm just pulling up the calendar. So December 31st is a Wednesday, January 1st for the Peach, Rose, and Sugars on New Year's Day on Thursday. And then you've got the Orange Bowl for the semifinal on Friday, January 9th. And then you have the Cotton Bowl playoff game on January 10th, which is a Saturday. And then, which is a Friday. No, Cotton Bowl's on a Saturday, excuse me. I had it right the first time. Then January 20th is a Monday. Or actually it's a Tuesday. Golly, I'm whiffing right here. Yeah, January 20th is a Tuesday, which is interesting. So they kind of scattered it all through between literally a whole month from December to January. So you get a little bit of a variety.
Yep. All those football players. It's going to be interesting how they balance it with the school year. Because for the most part, the bowl games are done by the time the spring semester starts, but now they're bleeding pretty deep in there. The transfer portal could be affected big time by that. I think the portal and like the last day to enter the portal, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like towards the end of December. Then they have, or like early January, and they only have until the school's early drop or add period to end. So like basically, if you're in a playoff team, you have to be fully committed, and it'll be interesting how that portal situation ends up because it's almost a guarantee at this point with how we've seen the portal. There's going to be one or two guys from some of these playoff teams that enter the portal and just leave that opportunity behind to go compete for a championship.
No, that's true. So it's exciting times, but change is occurring in college football. But anyway, we could talk a couple players here. Move on to 2024 or 2025, excuse me, 4-star defensive lineman Trent Wilson.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. He's been on the program, up from Maryland, the number 10 defensive lineman in the class. Has an unofficial visit with Oklahoma. He was on the show and he did mention the unofficial visit with OU. I feel like, and we've had him on the program. I feel like his story of him initiating the contact with Oklahoma is a good thing, and it has to speak some sort of volumes.
I'd like to go back on this show's history, and with all the kids who are uncommitted who have came on and became friends of the show, what number of those kids end up committing to Oklahoma? Because I feel like, and not to toot our own horn here, but I feel like most of those kids end up committing to Oklahoma. I don't want to say it's because of us, but maybe it's because of us. So I just think maybe one of these days I'll go back and look at all of our interviews with kids who are not committed at that point and see how many actually end up, doing it. For sure, Danny Okoye comes.
So we were having some internet issues, but yeah, I think the hit rate is pretty good on what he was talking about. With regards to Trent, like Brandon was mentioning, the fact that he initiated the contact, I think is big for Oklahoma and their position in this. As March 9th visit for him is unofficial. So it's the time for him to start really visualizing. I believe it's going to be his first time in Norman. So this is really a big introduction for him. But it's also going to be huge for Oklahoma because major things happen after those visits. Mainly official visits start to get scheduled for the summer, which, as we talk about every single year, especially under Brent Venables, that's when a lot of damage is done for recruiting. When you start getting a lot of your commits and get kids to buy in. So hopefully not long after March 9th, which I believe is the date of the visit, we hear, all right, he's starting to schedule an official visit, for late May or early June or something, whenever Oklahoma's big visit day is for this cycle.
I would start to feel pretty confident with Oklahoma if he he comes out here on his own dime and then schedules that official, which seemed like Oklahoma is in line to get that official visit, assuming everything goes well. Brandon, do you have anything to add now that you're back?
No, I mean he was at Penn State and Florida State junior days.
Yeah, so
recently.
We'll see how it goes. Say on the defensive side. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
no, you're fine. See on the defensive side of the ball, Isaiah Gibson, 6'4" edge player, 245 pounds, out of Warner Robins, Georgia. He's the number 15 edge player, could argue to be number 10, depending on where you're looking. Oklahoma hosted him for the junior day a couple weeks ago. Oklahoma, going into Warner Robins, Georgia, going into the Peach State is no small task. He does have a crystal ball from Steve Wiltfong from last month in favor of the Bulldogs, which I don't think anyone's overly shocked that I would say you would think that Georgia would be the inside leader here. But Oklahoma seems to be at least getting some sort of traction with them. Obviously, you get them out here for junior days, you make a good impression. Jose, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the fact that he's already claimed Oklahoma is going to be a place he takes an official visit to is speaks volumes to how they're recruiting again at the defensive line. I mean, it is only 4 schools, and it's 3 other schools that are going to be really tough to beat out for defensive linemen, especially like you mentioned in Georgia, him being from the state of Georgia. I mean, some could argue that they had just as much of a case to be that 4th team in the college football playoffs this last season, going back to back. Didn't get a chance to defend their title. Probably going to come back with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, artificial or not. Kirby Smart's going to get those guys ready to go for next season and compete for another national championship. I mean, it's not going to be easy to go into that state and grab a kid, but getting an official visit, I know it's not what some people want to hear, but I think even if you lose this recruitment, which at this point, that's the direction that it's looking at, because it does seem like Georgia is the leading program far and away, but just getting these kind of kids, especially from, Georgia, Alabama, we've had a couple of those in the past that really consider Oklahoma, like getting those guys to take official visits and start considering Oklahoma as a real place to play football, especially on the defensive and offensive line. Like you're making moves. You're starting to get kids' attention when it comes to where they need to consider going to school and continuing their development.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Georgia's obviously the top dog here. It's tough to beat them out, but if we get an official, that's definitely a good start. We're not far off for his list here. Anything can happen once you get there. I think looking at him, he clocked 18.6 miles per hour, according to a GPS thing, according to his 24/7 page, which at 6'5", 245 to be moving almost 19 miles an hour. It's kind of scary. Imagine getting hit by that dude moving that fast.
It's pretty darn fast. I mean, he had 17 sacks last year.
Yeah, and I'd bet that 18 or point whatever you mentioned was in the space between the edge and the quarterback.
Yeah.
Can't imagine they clocked. He probably did not run 50 yards down the field.
I haven't seen it, but yeah, I feel like you're probably right. But I don't know, man. I know getting hit by that dude moving that fast would do some serious damage to you guys. I'd probably
feel nice.
I'd probably shake him off, make a play, but
yeah, you definitely would, for sure. But Miguel Chavis and Todd Bates are recruiting at a high level, and they're making waves with elite level talent along the defensive line, and that's what they were hired to do, and that's what they're doing. So Oklahoma seems to, I wouldn't get my hopes up unless if an official gets set up, then you start to be like, okay, maybe Oklahoma can actually win, really become a threat in this recruitment. Until that happens, once he officially schedules and, goes through all that stuff, that's when I'll start to be like, okay, I think Oklahoma's going to do this. I know it seems like he's going to, but we've seen a lot of things where we believe one thing's going to happen and then a visit never happens. So we'll see, because Georgia might come in and try to shut it down.
It's possible, but with how the spring is already lining up, that's another thing that we don't have to go too deep into, but a lot of official visits starting to get lined up, and we got to remember, these kids aren't limited to 5 anymore. They can take 50 for all they want. You're going to don't be scared if Oklahoma isn't on those initial lists of official visits. Those will happen in the summertime.
No, that's really fair. But, well, you guys have any final thoughts? If not, Brandon?
We'll just do your thoughts on the playoff format. We obviously led the show with that. Had a pretty fun discussion there. I'm sure you guys have your own thoughts. I'm sure you guys can correct us on some things that we may have botched. But yeah, just do your playoff thoughts there.
All right. If you made it this far, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below Brandon's Any Video Challenge. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below, and we'll catch you guys next time.